Good morning, everybody, and welcome to another Ascension Messages. My name is Bobbie Richardson. I will be your guide for today. I am an intuitive counselor and I do psychic readings using channel messages that come through, as well as tarot cards if you feel like. And we can get to the crux of your issues. We can find your gifts. We can look for connections to yourself, to your higher self and your soul, so that you can start to get messages for yourself. That's what I do in these sessions. So if you're interested, the link will be down below. I'm also an author, illustrator of 2 children's books, and I'm a creator of Fortune Dice, which is on Etsy. The link is also down below as well. Today, I'm going to bring up some pretty powerful messages that I received. This is how it works for me. It can come through as I'm waking up. It can also come through as I'm driving. Sometimes a movie or something like that might ignite these memories, because throughout my life, I've been contacted by extraterrestrials, seen them, experienced them, the whole thing, and each time they come through to me, I think I was implanted, so to speak, with certain memories or understandings of different aspects of the higher frequencies, of the higher dimensions, and so I'm bringing them back. But what happened was, sorry, that's my cat in the background. She's having a play. So what happened was many years ago, decades ago, I was getting a lot of visions, like waking up and seeing beings and all sorts of things. We're talking codes that were in front of me. Anything from UFOs to extraterrestrials to just different objects that were flying at me, and to understand them, some of them I totally understood, and some of them were just beyond me. Sometimes the dead would come and I would see people that had passed over that I didn't even know had died, and be taken to help guide them through to releasing their grounded energy on Earth, so on Gaia, so they can restart or reboot a new life, all sorts of things. So I kind of lived in 2 different realities, and when it was bombarding me at one stage, I just said to my guides, this is too much. I need to take the reins back. I think I actually had a reading from somebody and they said, you're like a lighthouse and it's too much coming at you, so to take the reins. I think that's how that happened. We're talking decades ago now. So any case, I started to write. They actually gave me a vision of a pen coming over me and told me to write it down. So I started to write a lot of my stuff down. I've got it in books. Any case, they said to me, if you're taking the reins, you have to ask the questions. So that's another thing that inspires me, is maybe I'll be watching a movie of some kind and I'll go, yeah, but what is that in relation to blah, blah? And then 2 days later, I'll be driving in my car and I would get this, oh my God moment, like this. The pieces of the puzzle fit together from the information that I got years ago, plus what's coming. So not sure if you're going to call that a channeled message or a memory of my soul lineage, but it works anyway. So I'm driving in my car and I got this real crazy aha moment. Also, my guides will kind of lead me in a way. In other words, I've been showing Mars recently, and then been taken to Venus as well. And I'm like, why is this happening? And then I think I saw a movie, and they were talking about that a war had been on Mars many eons ago. And it was like click, click, click. Everything just kind of made sense, because when I took the reins, then they told me, this is decades ago, to ask a question. I didn't know what question to ask, but one of the first questions I did ask was, what was the true history of humanity? What's the truth? I don't care if what they teach you in school is the truth. I don't care if it's some outlandish story. I don't care if it's boring. I don't care. I just want to know the truth. So they have been, over the last 10 years, 4 different beings have been contacting me, giving me their perspective of the truth, because the truth is in the eye of the beholder of the journey that they have taken. And you can kind of get a better truth or perspective from seeing all the different perspectives of these different beings and alien races that came to me. So I had the Anunnaki, the Lyrans, and the Palladians come to me. Plus, I had interaction with the reptilians before, but they ignited my strength. So there was, I could feel into their vibration, and so to speak, when that was happening. So I can kind of get a gist of the controlling consumerism that they had lost their own power within, and seeking to use humanity to guide them, and to use our imagination to guide them into creating the reality that served them. But they are always coming from a lack of, because they need us to create that with our imagination, because we have a huge, amazing, creative imagination. And now that the tables have turned, we've actually had this huge energy shift, so that they can't use our imagination anymore. We're taking that power back, and we're starting to pour more of our focus into what we want to create, rather than gift it to, the TV box and the programming and the movies that aren't conducive to where we want to go. Put that aside. So this message that was coming to me was to do with Mars and Venus and the history of humanity. It's probably gonna sound a little bit out there, but I'm gonna just speak it, because this is what came through for me. And you can take it as you like. You can, interweave it into your how you want into your reality, or not take it at all. It's up to you. I'm not here to enforce a new history onto you. I'm just here to be a guide, a conduit for higher frequencies to come through and share their stories. So some of the stories, some of it's what I've learned in the past, and some of it is like what I just found out now, but it's kind of like clicked all the pieces of the puzzles together. I'm going to start off with the energies from eons ago, and we're talking Atlantis, Lemuria time, when humanity was working, really just learning to work through their right hemisphere and connection to source energy, using their imagination to create their future. Intuitively gaining wisdom, communicating with Gaia, living in a Garden of Eden, so to speak, because we as a collective could come together and manifest whatever we wanted in the retrospect with communication with Gaia. We could ask her that we wanted some fruit, and then she would either tell us where to go find it, or she would literally grow it outside, in the fields outside for us. flowers, whatever we really desired. It was truly a Garden of Eden, heaven on earth, so to speak, very high frequency in that, but also for humanity anyway. But it was a time where we also had portals or gateways that were erected around the earth to be able to teleport through to different planets, especially the neighbors, our neighbors. We're talking Venus, and we could go to Mars as well, but Mars was seen as like a planet of lesser value to us at that time, because humanity in their psyche and their consciousness was gaining wisdom through interaction with beings that were of very feminine nature, Palladians, the Lyrans, anything to do with creating, using our ability to focus our attention onto what we wanted to create and bring it into our reality. We used a lot more, it was a lot more vibrational world that we lived in as well. Now, what had happened through that timeline, we did create cities and so forth. The one that keeps coming up with me is there's a circle and a circle and a circle and a circle. Yeah, we've got land, we've got water, we've got land, we've got water. And that was to create a vibrational conduits with source energy itself, so that we could have a direct connection to our souls. And our soul is source energy at its finest, but it's like a thread of source energy that's traveled through different adventures, different, gone into different avatars, into different planets, and a thread that comes through for each of us has that different storyline that we can tap into using our imagination, which conjures through the vibration that we needed to be able to bring through that information, and then have it come, whether we could ground it on with Gaia or whether we couldn't, depended on whether it was a vibrational match for Gaia as well. So we had to also remember that there had to be a vibrational match with Gaia and what she could handle. She could actually handle a lot more. She was a planet that was expanding her consciousness into something new. So also in that time, the reason why we didn't connect with Mars as much is because there was another body in front of Mars. Mars represents our logical brain, our left logical brain, and Venus, being love and connection to source energy, represented our right hemisphere. Now, in those days, because we were in a higher frequency, Venus, there's beings living there. There's another frequency pattern up higher, in a higher state of consciousness for Venus, that we could interact with those beings that lived on that planet. Mars, on the other hand, was the same, but it had a block, and that was on purpose. So if now we step up and we come from a perspective, an observational point of being source energy and looking and trying to create it, and we're now nurturing humanity's growth, where humanity was now born into having the ability with specific breeding of completely opposite beings. One was very logical, one was consumerism, and the other was creator and intuitive, and both were able to create in different manners. So one was more to do with outside itself. That's the logical path, and that creates the adventure that we can have, that we're in separated bodies and we can, have a solid crystal here that we don't put our hands through. That is all to do with the logical brain and logical lessons of ourselves. If we didn't have that, then it would be like we would be in a dream state. If we were just all very right hemisphere, we would flip in and out of different alternate realities. Our imagination is more fluent and our lifestyle would be more fluent. And it was a bit like that in the times of Lemuria, Atlantis, but also humanity did have their left hemisphere, but it was blocked so that we could learn all about our right hemisphere. So in the picture that I was gifted, when I actually asked to go in to become part of source energy, to actually feel what source energy felt like, I was taken eventually to Taurus energy, the donut shape, and the adventure is source energy, just love, splitting off, going into an adventure through humanity. So this is humanity's life path. And then, of course, source energy can go through all sorts of different other planets and other life forms. It's just absolutely unending. There's whatever your imagination can conjure up is what source energy can literally experience. But anyway, this path that I'm given obviously is for humans, since we're humans learning about ourselves. Comes from love as source energy, splits into humanity. The avatars of humanity had to go on a journey of learning all about their right hemisphere, and then eventually it had to learn all about the left hemisphere. And we've come full cycle now. We've come into the point of source energy where we're going to create something new. And that's why these stories are now starting to come up and people are starting to channel through this very valuable information. So way back, we had Atlantis, Lemuria, we had Venus closest to the sun, which the sun represents the energy coming from source energy. And then we had, now that every time I tap into this planet that was in between Gaia and Mars, they kept bringing me to a planet called Kepler kept going in my head. So I looked it up, and it was a new planet that they had found that was more Earth-like. So I'm guessing, I'm channeling through, I suppose, this information, or that planet was smaller than ours, but it was a body that could be very close to Gaia herself. So we had kind of like a go-between. It was blocking our path to our logical brain. So the energies on Gaia, on Earth at that moment, was more like anything to do with logic and creating outside ourselves, as in, chopping down trees and all that sort of stuff, was seen as primitive. It wasn't that it was belittled and put down because we were coming from love. It was just seen as not mature enough to be utilized, that sort of thing. But because humanity is born with these two hemispheres, we've come from both, if you want to go through the history of what I've been told, because I've been, had encounters from years ago of these four beings that I brought up before, and their side of the story. There was all these timelines that happened where each side had a chance to to kind of manipulate, is the only word I can put it, infuse their DNA with humanity. And so they were completely opposite. So they came at opposite times, and was able to infuse their DNA with humanity to create us. And we ended up having these two very, very vast. And that's only because Gaia herself could handle these very opposite poling energies. There's not many planets that could handle that much opposite energy in such a way of balance, but she was still learning, and we are kind of like her neuron paths of growth herself. So way back then, what had happened was because humanity did have an imbalance, and we come to a natural evolution of the right hemisphere, learning all that it could about itself and the feminine connection to source energy and other beings of higher frequency. And so it was an easier path then in that respect. But we hadn't learned anything about our logical brain, that the value of creating outside ourselves, so that we could create a new adventure through carving a new path on a stable, grounded reality with Gaia herself, instead of it just being an etherical adventure of astral traveling and zipping in and out of timelines and all sorts of stuff like that. This life from birth to death, and having memory every morning, and all of that is held by the logical brain. We hold memory of our past so that we can have a line that goes from birth to death, and we can follow it through as a logical story, instead of zipping in and out of all these different places, which kind of becomes it's just a present moment adventure, and it is what it is in the energy that the person could conjure up in that moment. But it's not a beautiful tapestry of one life going from birth to death, and then having history that we could remember and all that sort of stuff. So it's very valuable to humanity's consciousness and source energy, using us as, we are source energy conjuring through us into creating this beautiful reality, using both imaginative side and our logical mind to be able to create a story. So anyway, let's go back to Atlantis and Lemuria, where we were living in the Garden of Eden. We also had the ability to talk to and converse with animals. We were telepathic. So there's teleporting. All of those things were in our reality. There was other beings. There was lots of different beings that were here as well. Then we ended up, through our logical brain wanting to step into more maturity. I'm going to have to tell it in two different stories, because there's two different perspectives here that I have in my brain. We have the perspective of scientists starting to develop, which in that time and era, scientists were just kind of like, oh yeah, you do your stuff over there, it's okay, whatever. But because humanity had such a powerful imagination, and then grounding that imagination into our reality, it could cause issues. Now, there was a time where we become so good at using our right hemisphere that we had to now step into learning how to use our left hemisphere. That's why the scientists started to develop more, wanting to figure out more about this outside reality, what's happening, what can we create on planet Earth through our logical brain. But at the same time, because there was a shift that had happened from the perspective of source energy, realizing that, or prime creator realizing that humanity now wants to grow into learning and maturing the left logical part of themselves. So at the same time, it just happens symbiotically. The left brain ends up coming into reality, and that meant that there was outside of us, the planetary evolution had, Pleiadian Lyrans and all those other beautiful higher frequency benevolent beings working with us. All of a sudden started to see a shift in their reality around humanity, where there was the Anunnaki, the draconian agenda. They were starting to come more and more onto this planet. And so we ended up having this pull towards our logical brain and that side of ourselves, which is what they brought into the party kind of thing, into our DNA and our logical part of ourselves. So there was a kind of a war that started happening because it was such a huge imbalance, and Prime Creative was bringing in new energy for the logical brain to be able to learn more about ourselves on that side of it. So this war sort of broke out. And then humanity, with their amazing imagination, ended up working with, some of them as the scientists and stuff, started working with the draconian Anunnaki giant agendas. There's all sorts of other, I'm only coming from a very limited concept of this, but I can only tell you what I know. But I know that it's more vast than this. It's just that it's kind of like a very rough sketch of what this is all about that I'm telling you now. And then, so humanity split off, started working with the draconian agendas, and they were like, yeah, we want to learn more about our logical side of ourselves. Oh, but there's a war going on and we're going to have to do some experiments. And they sort of used or worked with humanity to create something that could, shift the table, so to speak. And that, from Prime Creator's an observational point of view, is what's supposed to happen. So the energy that's coming through the sun is conduent to our logical brain now starting to step up and learn about that. But being that we were very immature in our actions and not realizing what we could do, what we can muck up in all these different frequencies and dimensions, it ended up being that the planet that was kind of like a Kepler planet, that was a block between Mars and Earth, was experimented on, and it, through the war and all of that, ended up blowing up. So when it blew up, all of a sudden everything shifted. Number one, humanity became, because we're very compassionate people from our hearts anyway, we became fearful of our power, of that logical power all of a sudden. Well, before it was just like, it's okay. All of a sudden there was fear. All of a sudden there was guilt. And the guilt could be used against ourselves. And then all of a sudden, because we didn't have, we dropped in our, automatically fear and guilt, and feeling like a victim as well just makes us fall into, that's how we fell into a reality where we could not now use our telepathic abilities. And that's when the fall of Babylon happened, because it was like this, oh my God, we got to rebuild this place, and we couldn't rebuild it. So it was gone. So we decided to, I think there was, I'm almost seeing Babylon as almost like a monument of apology of what we'd done, but it all crumbled anyway, because the energy was not conducive anymore for us to learn about our right hemisphere and all that beautiful connection. It was conducive to us learning all about our left logical brain. So as far as I know, and what I've channeled through, and the information that I've been gifted by these different beings that have come to me throughout the years and stuff, they were telling me that And also, I had a general story of what was going on, and then I ended up feeling like there was a piece of the puzzle that I hadn't taken into account, and I ended up meeting with a dear friend of mine, Steve Kennedy, and he ended up just igniting this little snippet of me about this planet that was in between. And it totally makes sense because it was blocking us from our left logical hemisphere so that we can learn all about our right hemisphere. So it had to be blown up in that respect of now we have Mars, which was also wounded completely in that explosion, and all the beings, the Martians, the beings of Mars ended up going inside the planet. And because the outside core of it was just her. And this is part of the lockdown of humanity, feeling like we were the only ones. We're the only ones now. We have to now learn. We have to almost feel like we're doing this on our own. It's like a whole new isolation, lockdown of humanity. And strangely enough, we've just gone through a lockdown because we're coming back to source energy and prime creator, and just we had to learn all about ourselves again from this energy. So because we've come full circle out of learning everything that we could about our logical side. So in other words, when that shift happened, all the magical beings, Merlin, the witches, and all that sort of stuff started to be condemned because the energy was conducive to us learning all about our logical brain. So that planet was destroyed. There's no block anymore. Gaia has now got a whole new sense of another planet next to her, Mars. So now it's all about learning about the logical side of ourselves. Now we have, just like in our two hemispheres, we have Mars representing a logical brain, and Venus is closest to the source energy representing our feminine brain. So when we fell, it automatically happens because our energy is so low that when we looked over at Venus, instead of being able to see into this beautiful higher frequency of beings, we only see poisonous gas because that's the limit of Venus itself. Venus's energies cannot reside in fear-based scenario because it's coming from love and pouring energy through from source energy. So its base existence is in the fifth dimensional frequency. So whenever we, as now lower dimensional, lower vibration, fear vibration, I wouldn't even want to call it 3D, because 3D is necessary in the respect of that we're learning to create outside ourselves. It's more a lower frequency of ourselves that's coming from fear-based, guilt, and all those places that we're coming from, the lack of ourselves, and forgotten how magnificent we are. When we look over at Venus, it's just now poisonous gases, so you can't live there or anything like that. It's very much like Venus is like shut down from us. That's very similar to the right hemisphere is shut down from us. We're not allowed to enter it anymore. We can't access that side of it so that we can learn all about our logical path. And then we turn to Mars. Mars has been wounded. It's come from fear. It's come from a warlike zone. It's feeling pretty bad about itself, which has kept us in this bubble of reality of fear game. So, so now that we've entered into the vortex, and I feel like it's really interesting too. They kept bringing me to the Bible code and saying that everything was backwards. I feel like it was I think the Mayans said 2012 where the shift would happen, but time in this Bible code said that it was extended. Time was shifted, and also it comes and it was backwards. So I believe it's more 2021 that, and the end of 2020. Actually, I felt it was December 2020 and the 21st of December 2020 when I had a huge awakening of energy pouring through me. Coming from Uluru actually, and then going out through me to New Zealand and then further abroad. So it was a massive shift and a massive awakening of Gaia herself that had happened. And so from there on, it's like the energy's now shifted to the only thing that will work now for us, for humanity to progress into the evolution of ourselves and the growth of what we are, is to find balance. It's not to do with, just the right hemisphere coming in and recreating Atlantis and Lemuria. It's not just to do with, creating outside of ourselves and looking outside of ourselves for guidance, because the logical brain has no guidance unless it learns to trust the conduit of the right hemisphere, source energy coming through the right hemisphere and teaching through that into the logical brain. The logical brain accepts it, then we can create it. We have to come to balance. So this is why it's really important at the moment to learn to live completely in the moment. We want to be balanced beings now, where we can create from just a point of reference of self-respect, self-acceptance, self-love. And that's why we're going through these massive shifts at the moment, where the energies that's pelting Earth at the moment is literally shedding all of the old program of the logical brain being in charge and only looking outside ourselves for material wealth, or it's also asking us to look inside ourselves. Are we balanced with our material wealth and our abundance looking outside ourselves? If we're grounded, the absolution of our sovereign beings being abundant from within, and then matching up to that with our outside reality of wealth coming in as a material world. And when that starts to converge, when we start to see the outside matching up with the inside and all of that, and allowing our imagination to flow through us of all the lives that we've been on, and taking bits and pieces out of that to ground and create a whole new world, that's where we're going. That's what Prime Creator's energy is all about. So that's what we'll kind of, I don't want to say win the game, but it's like stepping into a place of peace within ourselves. So I was also taken many, many years ago, decades ago, to our future Earth and of our potential. So this is all to do with you, whether you want to go on this journey of self-discovery and aligning your logic with your intuition, starting to trust yourself as a whole being again. Then I stepped into this work, into another frequency. I lived on the top of a mountain, and I actually woke up in my dream. I woke up in this reality, and the first thing I noticed, I've never had this happen before in a dream, but my mind was completely still, like completely just present, and it was a very, very beautiful feeling. And yes, we could teleport. My friends teleported to my house. I had a huge wraparound veranda outside. We went outside. I could manifest if I wanted. I could manifest a cup of tea, or I could physically create the cup of tea. It wouldn't matter. We went for a walk around the veranda, and then right next to us was massive mountains. And I've actually painted this picture. It's not the best picture, but I every single brush stroke that I put in this picture was to do with the remembering that feeling of stillness within my mind.
then I knew from that dream, this is in my, I would have been in my 30s when I had this dream. Then I realized that was my compass. That's where I'm going. I know where I'm going. And I knew that straight after I'd had the dream. That's where I want to go. I want to bring my mind into that present moment awareness and learn how to do that. How do I do that? Well, then you get taken on a massive journey of clearing all the programs that you're not worthy, which keeps hooking you back into past problems, past issues, past, and then it's projecting it back into the future. You end up creating something you don't want. So I know 100% for me, for my value of who I am, I know that this place exists, and it's nothing to do with outside ourselves. It's all to do with our own inner journey and how much how do we feel about ourselves. How if we really want to just live on this planet and thrive, then we stand in that energy and we thrive. We become that. And then if someone comes along and says that they don't like what I'm doing or whatever, and they want to kind of destroy, it doesn't matter anymore, because I've already embraced that part of me, and I know I'm worthy of being here, and they're coming from a lack, so it'll just bounce off back to them to show them where they're lacking, and they won't like that, so they'll move on to try to find someone else who's also coming from their lack to be able to pull them into their circle so that they can both fight and come from their lack, which is where the energy that we came from before. So this is all to do with coming back to self and creating a sovereign energy field of who we are and the value of us being in this body on this planet, and what can we create, what do we want to create, what do we desire, and knowing that the universe is going to match that frequency with us now, because we're coming from a balanced mind. We're not poo-pooing our logical brain or anything like that. It has absolute value to have a story of birth to death and history and all that. It's very valuable, and to be able to create outside ourselves, but also to be able to see, get in touch with Gaia again, and recognize her as a body, a soul with a new self, and that we can work with Gaia and conjure up, and be able to bring in the reality that we deserve to through her as well. I might do a live with for people to come in and ask specific questions, but I don't want it on, I don't want those questions to be on, am I going to find a relationship? Am I going to end up? I want the bigger questions, because I want to be able to channel through information for the bigger questions. And I'll try to be as, my logical brain to be as still as possible to allow this information to come through for the answer. Also, I'm playing with the idea of creating a psychic school, because I feel that's the next, just for education, because we're going to be bringing in our psychic intuitive abilities. So if anyone is interested, it will be a Zoom call. I'm not seeing it as a recorded Zoom call or anything like that, just a closed off private classroom. I might use parts of it to advertise or something, but I'll ask you before I record, so that's should be all private. I'm still working out the ins and outs of the whole thing. But if you are interested, you can email me. The link is down below as well. And so let's see where that one goes. Love you guys heaps. Until next time. Bye.